All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Discovering Grayslake. This is one of the only ones I've done over Zoom because Mr. Hook wasn't available to drive in today to record with me. So I'm here with Jay Hook. How are you today, Jay?
I'm fine, David. Nice to speak with you.
It's nice. I've been hunting you down a little bit because your name has come up in a lot of different circles, that's for sure.
Hmm. Well, I'm a very old guy.
Okay, can I ask how old are you now?
88. I'll be 89 next month.
All right, fantastic. And you're not living around here anymore. You're where are you
No,
living?
we live in northern Michigan. I don't know if you know where Traverse City is, but it
Yeah.
would be about opposite the other side of Lake Michigan from Green Bay.
Okay, nice.
There's a peninsula here called Leelanau Peninsula, and we live on that peninsula. We have a farm there.
Beautiful. Kind of relaxing, huh?
Well, it is and is not. When I say a farm, it's a fairly big piece of property, and it's user friendly for grandchildren and now great grandchildren.
Beautiful. All right. So when I first reached out to you, it's funny because we're trying to gather stories of Grayslake and find out, especially residents that live here now or maybe not know a lot about the past and preserve some stories that I think this wonderful town has produced. So you got to see a lot of those firsthand.
Good.
Okay, so were you, let's talk about childhood first of all, because I know that you went to high school here, but tell me like where you were born and where raised.
I was actually born at the hospital in Waukegan.
Okay.
My my mother's side of the family, they came from Sweden and settled in the northern part of Lake County there on farms. And then she married my father, who was also had come from England, I think, his family,
Okay.
and they had a place up. Their names were Doolittle. I don't know if you remember the story about Jimmy Doolittle, but that was some. He was one of the first pilots that flew over and bombed Japan in
Oh,
World War
really?
II. Then he became general of, I think, of the Air Force in Europe and other places.
Wow.
So and then that family they got married, and my father opened a drugstore in Grayslake, Illinois, and then he sold it, and in the early '40s, and we moved to Aurora, Illinois, just south of Chicago, and then we moved back to Grayslake again after 3 or 4 years. I was just a little boy, and and my dad opened another drugstore called Cease's Drugstore in Grayslake, and he had that until he passed away.
Wow. And that was right on Center Street, right? Right in
It
town.
was, yes, yes.
Wow. So as a little boy, did you spend some time there?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a great place to grow up. I went to the grade school there, which was up through eighth grade. And the guy that was the principal was a guy by the name of Len McCain,
Okay.
and he was also the basketball coach. But he played a part in my life. He helped me get into Northwestern University, and then when I was playing professional baseball, he had gone to Brea, California, just south of LA.
All right.
And when we'd go in to play the Dodgers, we'd always contact each other, and I'd get together with he and his wife, and go out to eat or whatever. But he was the initial kind of influencer on my life, I guess.
Wow. Okay, so where was the Grayslake grade school then? Was that where
It would have been right. Well, let's see. Is the Chevrolet dealership still there?
Oh no, no. But so Lake Street and Route 120.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So which would when I grew up it was called Lakeview School, I think.
Okay, is there still a school there now?
There is. It's Christian Academy right now.
Christian Academy.
Westlake Christian Academy is right there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
And so you went to grade school there and then you went to the obviously the high school.
right, right.
I,
And the principal at the high school at that time was a guy by the name of Larry Roush,
Larry Broush.
and there were a number of coaches there that were guys that had come back from World War II. and been in duty around the world, and they were just terrific. The number of coaches. Pat Rooney was the football coach. Paul Subject was the baseball coach. Walt Nessheim, I think, coached some basketball, and it was just a great group of people.
Yeah. Oh, so what was it? I know that when's the last time you were in Grayslake? Do you know how long it's been?
Oh, it's probably now been 3 or 4 years.
Okay. So you got to see how things have changed. What did you think when you came back into town?
Well, there was a lot that changed, but a lot of stuff I recognized. We used to live right on Front Street or whatever that where all the stores are.
Okay.
Is that still called Front Street or what is
Center Street, where all the stores
Center
are,
Street?
right? Yeah, right down the middle. Yeah.
Center Street, yeah. And if you went to the west end of Center Street before you came to the road that goes north and south,
Hmm.
the and our house was right there on Center Street,
Wow.
and my dad's store was only a block away.
Wow.
So, and it was not very far to the high school.
No, no, we can walk right down there. Uh,
Right.
okay, so growing up here, I always like to hear stories of like, like, so what did you do as a kid when you have the drugstore? So what did you do for fun as a kid around here?
Oh, well, I actually lived first before my folks bought that house, and it was my grandparents' house on Center Street. But I lived over on, just is the lumber yard still there?
It is not.
Not. Okay. Do you know where the lumber yard used to be?
I sure do. Hook's Lumber, right?
Yep. That was my uncle.
Your uncle.
And then just south of the lumber yard there was American Legion post. And then just south of that American Legion post, we lived in a house on the corner, um, where I don't know what Seymour or something like that.
Wow. Okay, so your uncle who owned Hook's Lumber, what was his first name?
Everett.
Okay. So he had the lumber yard and your dad had the drugstore.
Right, right.
Wow.
And an interesting story about the lumberyard. When I think I started working at that lumberyard when I was maybe in eighth grade or seventh grade or eighth grade,
Okay.
putting up nails in the room. They'd come in big kegs, and my cousin and I would put them in bags. But then we moved on to as we got into high school. I worked there every Saturday. And you know how everybody now goes to weightlifting places and physical fitness places and all that. Well, growing up through the lumberyard played a good part of my athletic prowess
Okay.
because my cousin and I, my cousin John, and he's passed away now, I think, but he we would unload railroad cars because they'd pull the railroad cars right in the building, and there'd be sheetrock or cement or whatever, and we'd unload the rail cars, and then they also delivered coal, and so we had to shovel coal, and we did a lot of work.
Sounds like it.
And it really, I think, was great because I think I developed fairly good strength just working. And there was an old Norwegian guy in that lumberyard by the name of John Olson, and he loved baseball, and he loved the Boston Braves before they moved to Milwaukee. And then when they moved to Milwaukee, in the center of the lumberyard, there was a sawmill. There was always a radio on in that sawmill of the games being played either in Boston or in Milwaukee after they moved to Milwaukee. And when we'd finish work, my cousin and I, John Olson, would say, "Come on, boys, let's have a game of catch." And he taught me how to throw a curveball, and we played catch almost every night.
Wow. Well, that paid off for you a little bit.
It did.
So let's jump. We're gonna jump around a little bit because I was actually visiting my father yesterday and I told him that I was going to speak with you. And when I got to his house and we spoke about this, there on the desk is the baseball card, the Mets baseball card, the one that pops up on all the things. So I want to because I'm a huge baseball fan, as many people know. So going to Grayslake High School, I want to talk about how things work for you to get where you to play in the major leagues.
Well, I of course played football, basketball, and baseball at Grayslake. My senior year, I made all state in all three of them, and so I had a we didn't win a whole lot of games, but I had a good career, in high school. Then I went to Northwestern University on a basketball scholarship, actually,
Really?
and then I was studying engineering, and I got a job in Milwaukee. They had a co-op program, so I during the summers I would go to work in a factory or whatever. One summer I worked in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, at Carnation Can Company, and I would take over the old Germans that worked there in the shop. Excuse me,
Oh, you're
in
fine.
the shop, and I would they'd teach me how to run their machine, and then I'd run it while they were on vacation. And then the next summer, I worked in Milwaukee, and I played for a liquor distributorship company. My name was Schallert's Liquor, and Mr. Schallert was like a second father to me. And he had a son that would play at Northwestern also, and he had a baseball team he sponsored for Sandlot baseball around southern Wisconsin. And I think he must have called scouts every time I was going to pitch, because the scouts started watching me up in Wisconsin. And I was probably 19 then or something like that.
Okay.
And anyway, one day I got a call from a scout with the Cincinnati Reds. And he said, Jay, he said, we're interested in signing a guy. Would you come and throw some batting practice to him? And at some field in southern Wisconsin, and I did, and the guy didn't hit it too well, but anyway, I did, and about a week or two later, the Cincinnati Reds were coming in to play the Milwaukee Braves, and this scout called me and he said, Jay, would you come out and work out at County Stadium? We'll have a uniform for you. And we just want to watch you throw there in the stadium, on the sidelines or whatever. So I did that, and when I finished throwing, the manager of the team, I think it was Bertie Tebbets or somebody like that, and he said, Jay, would you fly back to Cincinnati with us tonight and throw batting practice to the Reds tomorrow afternoon? And I said, gee, I don't know if I can do that. I have a job. And so I called the guy I worked for. I was doing drafting and stuff that summer. But I called him and I said, I've had this opportunity to go to Cincinnati. Would it be okay if that must have been a Thursday, because I would have had to work on Friday. And he said, oh, no, that'd be fine, Jay. Just take the day off. So I flew back to Cincinnati with the Cincinnati Reds team on their company plane, and I threw batting practice to the Reds the next day, and I could throw pretty hard, and so I had to throw batting practice to this group of Ted Kluszewski and Wally Post and all these guys who were with the Reds,
Oh.
and we finished that, and I think the general manager of the Reds was a guy named Gabe Paul, I think, and he said, "Would your dad fly down here?" I said, "Well, he has a business. I don't know if he can get off, because he's a druggist and he's the only pharmacist in the place." So I called my dad, and he agreed to fly down to Cincinnati, because I was too young to sign a contract, I guess.
Okay.
And so they offered me a bonus to sign with the Cincinnati Reds. And if your bonus was bigger than 20,000, you had to go right in the major leagues at that time. And
Wow.
so about 2 weeks later, the general manager and a couple other people came to Grayslake, and they came to our house, and had a contract for me, and I had to sign that. My dad had to sign it, and then I had to go right with the Reds that September,
Wow.
and so I pitched a couple games in relief. But the interesting part was, and this just occurred to me just recently. Did you see the one of the when the Cubs I think were playing the Braves at the county stadium? There was a guy throwing 102, 103
Yeah,
miles an hour.
Jason Mizorowski.
Okay,
Yes.
and I was watching him throw, and I don't know how hard I threw back then, but it was pretty hard. And and I thought, there he is on that mound. He's 20 years old or 21 years old or something like that. I thought the last game of the season, the manager said, Hook, you're the starting pitcher tonight against the Milwaukee Braves. And the Milwaukee Braves had clinched the pennant. And that was, they had a Hank Aaron, Henry Aaron, and all these different players that were terrific players. And so here I was a few weeks before I'd gone there for a tryout. Now I was the starting pitcher on that game. It was the last game of the season. And and I pitched 5 innings off that mound. And I came off the mound in the fifth inning, and Bertie Tebbett said, "Kid, you're too young to pitch a no hitter. I'm taking you out of the game."
Oh my God.
Because I hadn't given up a hit.
And they
And
took you
of
out
course,
after
all the
five.
guys I'd played with that summer and everything, they were there to watch.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a fun way to end the season.
Yeah, so your first start, you got to pitch against Hank Aaron and a bunch of those guys.
Right, right.
That's crazy. That is
And
absolutely.
then the next year they changed the bonus rule so they could send me out to minor leagues. So that summer, my wife, I got married that winter too, and and we went to Nashville, Tennessee,
Okay.
and we were there for the part of the summer, and I got called up at the end of that year, and then the next year I got sent to Seattle, which was AAA. So we were both out, my wife and I, and we had a son, and we were in Seattle for the early part of the summer, and about the middle of July, the guy that was the manager of the Rainiers there in Seattle got called up to be the manager of the Reds, and 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 I was having a pretty good year in Seattle, and he called me up to the major leagues, and my wife and our son flew back to Chicago because my wife was from Evanston, so she could just go to their house. And I drove from Seattle to Chicago
That's a
in
hike.
like 18 hours because I didn't hardly sleep. I sleep a couple hours in some little town or something. And when I got there, the manager said, "You're starting tomorrow." That was the first game I won in the major leagues was after I'd driven 18 hours
Oh
from
my
Seattle.
That's great.
But I loved Wrigley Field. I really loved the pitch there because there are a couple of reasons. But back then, I don't know if it's still true, but the Bears played in the same stadium as the Cubs, and so they didn't have the mound was just a mound, and all other parks the mound was tapered down to the baselines.
Right.
And when you'd stand on that mound at Wrigley Field, and the back was fairly close to the home plate,
Right.
and you felt like you could throw the ball through a wall, because you felt like you were up pretty high.
Yeah.
And so then from then on, I was in the major leagues.
Wow. So that was with Cincinnati. When we spoke before, because I know that the card I have for how did you get to the Mets?
Well, when and this ties in with some people that were Len McCain, who'd been the principal and the basketball coach at the grade school, went to Brea, California, to take a job as superintendent of schools, and whenever we'd go to the L.A. I'd get together with him and his wife Helen, I think her name was, And while I was out there, he asked me if I'd come and speak at one of the schools he was head of, and which I did. And that was about the middle season of 1961. And for some reason, he didn't know this, and I guess I didn't either. But they had a epidemic of the mumps going around at that school. I contracted the mumps of all things, and it just knocked me out. I was weakened, and all my glands were puffed up, and so I was out of baseball for a couple of weeks during that. But then when I came back, I really wasn't too good, and, and the Reds went on to win the pennant that year. And so I was with the team, and I pitched some, but I didn't have a good year. And I ended up pitching a little bit in the World Series against the Yankees, but the Yankees won. And we were driving home because I was going to grad school at Northwestern studying engineering. And our son had, by then we had a daughter too, and we had the two kids. They flew back to Chicago with Joanne's parents, and Joanne and I drove back to Chicago because I was going back to grad school, and we were thinking about Indianapolis, and we were listening to the radio, and they were talking about the new Mets team, and they said these are the players they've drafted, and they called my name, and I didn't even know that I was on the draft list. But they and the first thing they did was get a hold of me to get me a exam again to see if I'd recovered from these bumps. But so I was drafted by the Mets, and that would have been before the 1962 season.
Right.
And then so I went to spring training with the Mets then, and Casey Stengel was the manager. And I looked at that team, when I got to Evanston, and I looked at who they had drafted, and they had a lot of players from the Dodgers, the old Dodgers, and the Yankees, or not the Yankees, but the Giants. And we were going to play in Polo Grounds, which had been the old park in New York. And they so anyway, that winter, I just was with the Mets now, and then I went to spring training with them and became one of their starting pitchers.
Wow.
And I actually, when you were saying baseball cards,
Yeah.
I still get probably 20 to 30 letters a month with baseball cards in them, asking me to sign the baseball card. And a lot of them want me to also put down first Mets win, because I pitched the first game that the New York Mets won in their history. It was in Pittsburgh. I think I got one or two hits also.
Oh, you were batting too. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty good thing. Like, how amazing is that? The first New York Mets win as a pitcher. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we'd lost, I think, 9 games in a row to start the season.
Oh, so you broke
And
the
I,
losing
I
streak
had
there.
pitched once before, and we were leading, and I got taken out in the eighth inning with the lead. But then in the eighth and ninth, the relief pitcher gave up a couple of runs. And so it knocked that one out. I didn't lose the game, but I didn't win it either.
Right.
And then, 4 or 5 games later, then I pitched in Pittsburgh. And if they'd have won that game, they would have set a record for most wins at the start of the season.
Really?
And if we'd have lost, we'd have set a record for most losses at the beginning of the season. And that year we lost 120 games, which was a record.
Right. Hey, didn't
And
I think that record just got beaten by our beloved White Sox here, didn't they? I think they lost more than 120.
and you'll laugh at this, but I got a number of calls from reporters with papers in Chicago, and they wanted to know if I was happy that the White Sox were going to break our record. And I said, who would ever wish that on anybody?
No, no. That had to serve for a pretty long season, huh?
Yes.
Wow. That's fantastic. I got a couple more baseball questions, and we're going to do some more Grayslake because I'm fascinated by who is the toughest guy that you ever pitched to?
In the major leagues.
Yeah,
Excuse me. Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, those guys were good batters.
yeah,
And I had success against them, but I also had a lot of hits off them they got too. So,
right,
it was not one way all completely.
right. Well, that's cool. So you played
I'll
from
tell
around.
you an interesting story that involves Grayslake also. When I was about maybe 10 years old or 12 years old, the head of the American Legion for the state of Illinois lived in Grayslake.
Okay.
And I was out playing catch on that corner lot with my dad, and and he came walking by. I can't remember his name, Doug. I can't remember. Anyway, if I remembered, I'll say it. But he came walking by and he said, "Jay, they're having a Babe Ruth Day at Comiskey Park in a couple of days, and the American Legion is sponsoring it." So he said, I'm going to go down and be out on the field, but I wondered if you'd like to go to the game." And, I was 12 years old or something.
Right.
And I said, "Oh boy, that'd be great." So he took my cousin and I, my cousin was a year older. And we both worked at the lumberyard, but, we were good friends. But he took both of us to that game. And, and, we had seats right behind the dugout. I mean, he got good seats. He was out on the field with Babe Ruth, and he came walking over to where we were sitting with Babe Ruth, and he introduced us to Babe Ruth. And then he had in his pocket a couple of baseballs. He said, "Babe, would you sign these baseballs for the boys?" And so Babe did. And for many years, I had this baseball with Babe Ruth's signature on it. My cousin did too, but I think he played with his.
Oh my God.
But I kept mine in a sock drawer at my folks' house. And anyway, after I think it was about 1975, Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's record of 715 home runs or whatever it was. And I was at that time working for a company by the name of Rockwell International. And I was vice president of marketing and sales. And I used to entertain different customer people at sporting events around the country. And Rockwell had airplanes, and so we had our own plane and everything. But I took a group of guys to Milwaukee to I think it was an all-star game or something like that. And I thought, I think I'll take that Babe Ruth ball with me to that game and get Hank Aaron to sign the same ball. And anyway, when Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's record, I was working, and my son called me up from home. This was our oldest son, and he said, "Dad, how many home runs did you give up to Hank Aaron of those 715 or whatever?" And I said, "Gee, Wes, I don't know. He used to play Stratomatic baseball and all this other kind of stuff. He was very interested in all that." And I said, "I don't know, Wes, but it was a number. I gave him a number of home runs." Well, the next day in the Detroit Free Press, they printed every home run that Hank Aaron hit, like 2 pages of lists. Right. And it gave the place that he hit it and who was the opposing pitcher. And Wes called me at work and he said, "Dad, this was in the paper, that all the home runs." And he said, I counted them up. And I'm going to get rid of him. He said, "I counted them up. You've given 8 home runs to Hank Aaron." Said, if I might be a smart aleck son, he said, "If you'd been in the league a little longer, you could have held the record." But anyway, I took that ball to Milwaukee with me that night, and I went in the clubhouse because I knew where it was, of course, and I knew Hank. I didn't know him well, but I knew of him. And I went up to him and said, "Hey, babe, Hank, would you sign this baseball?" He said, "Oh, sure." And I said, "Have you signed many of these?" And he said, "Well, I had a few, not many. And of course that was like in what year would that have been? Maybe 1974 or something like that.
Okay.
And so I just kept the ball. So I had this ball, and my son lives in Austin, Texas now. He's an AI kind of guy, and 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 he was coming up to visit, and I said, Wes, why don't you bring a briefcase with you? Because I don't want you to tuck this ball in your luggage, and you can just keep the briefcase with you on the plane when you go home.
Right.
And I looked up what that ball may be worth now, and it was a lot of money.
I would assume so. Wow. So he still has the ball?
Well, it's our son has it.
Your son has it.
It's out
Wow.
in Austin, Texas now.
Wow. That is crazy. What a cool thing. Just to say that you got to meet Babe Ruth other than anybody else. That's
And
pretty
that was because of Grayslake. You
See?
know,
That's fantastic. Wow, how cool. I bet you have a million stories about stuff like that. That's what a so I think about that like when you tell the story so casually, but as a 19-year-old having the Cincinnati Reds come to your house in Grayslake, you must have been out of your mind excited.
well, but Paul Subject was the baseball coach, and he was there with us. And the picture that we have of him of me signing the contract was Paul was right there,
That's really
and
cool.
he was just a terrific guy. He's passed away now. He was the math teacher, and he was the baseball coach. And actually, I spoke at his funeral when he passed away.
Wow, what an honor. That's really cool. When I was doing some research on you, just kind of like browsing through and checking things out, one of the photos came up not too long ago. Didn't you throw the first pitch out at a Mets game, like early
Yeah,
2020s?
I, I actually, yeah, that was just recent.
Yeah,
But even before that, I should tell you a quick story
yeah.
with the Mets. What was the one I was thinking of? Anyway, that event, I was at the. We have a little local restaurant here near the farm, Maple City, and I go there 3 4 times a week mornings with have breakfast with a bunch of guys who are coaches or have kids in high school. It's how I stay up to date. It's like being in Grayslake at Cease's drugstore. You see coaches and you see guys that are associated with the school, and it's so fun to go to. But I was sitting there having breakfast, and I got a phone call from a vice president of the Mets, and I said, "Gee, guys, I better take this call." I said, "I'll take in the back room." So I went in the back room of the restaurant. And it's a guy by the name of Jay Horowitz, who's the vice president of alumni relations. But he said, Jay, he said, we're having an alumni game, the 60th anniversary of the New York Mets.
Wow.
And he said, can you play in the alumni game? And I said, gee, Jay, I can't play in the alumni game. He said, well, we got you down for throwing the first pitch before the game. I said, well, I'll work on that. I'll work on that and be able to do it. But we went to New York. I think we had 28 of our family members with us. And it was just a fun thing. And all the kids, we've got a couple of daughters, who said, well, we better get shirts for everybody. So they got shirts with 47 hook on the back of the shirt, and they got Mets hats, and they were all sitting together in this one area.
How wonderful.
And it was the kids all, they never had been through this stuff,
Right.
and so it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet. I want to go back to one thing that you said because how did you meet your wife? You said she was from Evanston and you were at Northwestern. Was it a college thing?
Yeah, she just walked by here. I better not tell the real story.
I have my own version.
Yeah,
She has her own version of this
maybe
story.
we should get both and make sure so we could differentiate what the truth is.
Well, she was from Evanston, and her grandfather was a doctor in Chicago,
Okay.
and they had a summer home at Drews Lake, which
Yep.
is just up north, a little north, a little east of Grayslake.
Yep.
And so in the summertime, she would come up because her grandmother would come up for the summer to this home on Druce Lake. And Joanne would come up and live with her and watch after her. And Joanne was that summer was teaching swimming to handicapped children for the Red Cross because Joanne was good at swimming and horseback riding and other things. And one day, John and I, my cousin, were delivering lumber with the lumber truck, and we came roaring around one corner just before we got to the lumber yard, and there was this old green Cadillac sitting in the middle of the road with both doors open and two or three kids on each side of the car. And of course, they blocked our way of getting back to the lumberyard, but we hollered at them and said, "Get that thing out of the," we were pretty obnoxious. And
Yes, they were.
and anyway, so we got back to the lumberyard, and later in the day, I was out sweeping in front of the lumberyard, and this green Cadillac pulls up, and it's Joanne, my wife, and I wasn't then. I didn't even know her then. And she pulled up and she said, "Say, I understand you and your brother go to Northwestern." And I thought, who's this woman pulling up? And she was pretty good looking too. She was the homecoming queen in Northwestern a little bit later and did a few things like that. But anyway, I said in a kind of rough tone, "For one thing, he's not my brother. For another thing, he doesn't go to Northwestern. I do." and she rolled up her window and said, "Oh, okay, goodbye." and she drove home to her grandmother's house. And I thought, man, that was stupid of me. Nobody had a Cadillac in Grayslake at that time except maybe the real estate guy. and I thought, I should have been much nicer. So I called her. I found out who she was, as you can do around Grayslake. And I found out she lived at her grandfather's house, and I could find the phone number. So I called her up on the phone, and I said, "Joanne, my cousin and I are going to the Wisconsin State Fair next Saturday, and he has a girlfriend he's taking, and I wondered if you'd like to go with me." And she said, "Oh, yeah, I think I would. That'd be fun."
That's great.
So she went with us to the state fair, and we're walking into state fair, and she looks up at the rides, and there's a roller coaster stuff right near the entrance. And she says, "Oh, I love riding roller coasters." I thought, "Oh, man, I got sick on Ferris wheels." But I grinned and bear it and went on the roller coaster. But that led to a lot of things. And we dated for quite a while, and then ended up getting married.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, what would her version be different?
Well, she would say I had all these kids that I would bring in from Druce Lake, and they'd pay me 25 cents to take them. Of course, then gas was only 20 cents a gallon. And she said, "And this Cadillac's a real old Cadillac. It was my grandfather's or father's."
That's great, though. Okay, so I want to talk about the drugstore. So, for people that don't understand, because obviously things were a lot different then, right? So, what kind of things it sounds like a place where people would gather too. Is that right?
Well, there was a soda fountain on one side of and I had to work there sometimes, but it seemed like on Saturdays, the coaches were always in there drinking coffee. And they would give my father such a hard time about how bad the coffee was. They call it battery acid and everything. And my dad would get a kick out of it. He loved it. He liked to talk about sports and because he loved sports too. And
They served good food too.
yeah, they served good enjoyment. So they served some pretty good food. But and when I'd go in there and work, I'd before my friends would come in and want me to make banana splits and milkshakes and all this stuff. And I said, Dad, do you mind how I make them? Said, no, make them any way you want, And so they were always very thick and a lot of ice cream, a lot of coloring.
Right. That's fantastic. So that must have been fun. That must have just a different way of life at that time, right?
It really was. And that's why I said this pig town thing I go to here. You get to know the local people and they know you and a lot of conversation about what's happening with high school sports or high school other things. And you stay involved with the community. And that was Grayslake High School. I mean the people in Grayslake were very supportive of the school and the teachers. And I'm sure there were differences, but I had so much respect for the coaches.
Hmm.
And I tell you a funny story. One time, the coaches were not easy. Pat Rooney had been a sergeant, I think, in the army during World War II. In France and everything. He was a tough guy. And one day, I was playing football and I hit a tackled guy head to head. And then you didn't have face guards, you didn't have mouth guards, you didn't have anything. And I knocked out a tooth, just from biting. I went over to the sidelines and I said, "Hey, coach, I just knocked out a tooth on that tackle." He says, "Well, give me the tooth and get back in there."
Wow. Yeah, so you got some tough guys there.
Well, they were tough guys, but they were good guys. They really cared about the students. They cared about the players. And they were things that that they had a tough life already.
Right. Tell me some things that you did for fun here, especially, on that one road there. Any stores or places that you used to hang out that you have fond memories of?
No, I didn't hang out a lot because I was so involved, with the school and with sports.
Right.
That kind of occupied my house, my life, and I drove an old Dodge car because it had been my grandfather's. But I'll tell you a quick story about when my grandfather. His name was John Wesley Hook,
Okay.
and the way I got the name Jay was my folks wanted to name me after John Wesley Hook, but my cousin was named John before. He's a little older than I was, so they named me James Wesley Hook. But then they called me JW, and then from the time I was a little kid, I'd go by JW. But then when I got to school, I said, "Well, how do I write J?" JY became,
Oh, really?
and from then on, I was called J.
Interesting. Very interesting. Um, so your family has deep roots that help shape our town into what it is today. Really, Hook's
Yeah,
Lumber was there forever.
my grandfather John was postmaster for a while,
Okay.
and then he also had a butcher shop on one of the ends. It was down toward the bowling alley. I don't know if the bowling alley is still there.
Oh no. Yeah, I heard an interesting story about the bowling alley burnt down on Christmas Day. I forget what year it was, but um,
Mm,
yeah, and I know exactly where it was.
mm.
So butcher shop.
You knew about the lumberyard fire too, didn't
That
you?
was on New Year's Day.
Oh, New Year's Day.
I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah, no, I didn't know about the lumberyard fire.
Yeah, that burned down too. One.
Really? Wow.
Might have been
Um,
the same person. Who knows?
so lumberyard, butcher shop, the drugstore with soda fountain. I think that's a lost art. I wish we had something like that around here. That would be really cool.
Well, it was just we didn't go anywhere. I mean, I just was happy being at Grayslake.
Right. Well, and any idea what the population of Grayslake was then?
For some reason, 1,200 hits my mind, but I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, seeing some of the old photographs and things of, downtown and the things that have changed and, a lot of things have stayed the same are I think we're at like 22,000. Someone don't anybody correct me that's listening.
Well,
About
they
20.
must have expanded the borders too.
Yeah, so a lot of building after, all of the things that, on the other side of Jones Island and all the other places we used to hang out and cause trouble, all turned into houses over there. So how many different homes did you live in? Just the two? Um,
Just the two, yeah,
just the
yeah.
two.
Then
Um,
my folks actually after they moved to Park Place. There's used to be a park
mhm.
there, and Park Place is kind of around that park.
Yep,
And they lived on the west or the let's see the west side of that little park.
yep.
I don't
Yeah,
know what the street was. Maybe it was a
yeah,
park.
yeah, and the park is a memorial park now.
Is it okay?
Yeah, so
There
that's
was
where we do.
the cemetery on that plot too.
Yes, over at yes on there. Yeah, it's funny how the little town goes from your memories to what my children's memories will be from
Right,
growing up here.
right,
And a
right.
lot of and a lot of special people that shaped this town, right? That
Mhm.
came way before me as well.
Well, that I think when I think of my grandparents, um, they came. I think I'm not sure on my mother's side. I know her parents came from Sweden,
Okay.
but I'm not sure when the Hooks came from England. Uh, it could have been with my great grandparents or my grandparents. It could have been too, but I
Yeah.
don't recall that.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions, especially like when we go look back, is like I always want to find out how in the heck do people end up in Grayslake, between Chicago and Milwaukee and
Right,
I want
right.
to know how he got there.
Pardon?
I want to know how, is that Eric?
No, it's David.
Oh, I want to
Joanne
know.
wants to know how you got there,
I
Dave.
was I was born here. I never had a choice. My family lived here. My mother grew up here. So she
Oh,
went to St. Gilbert High School or St.
okay.
Gilbert Grade School, and then
Yeah.
she went to Grayslake. But my grandparents were here. You know what? I need to do some research on to see how they ended up here.
What
Um,
was what was what was your mother's maiden name?
Mother's maiden name was Brawley. So
Bro.
she was born in 44.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so my grandfather and grandmother lived here for a long time. I think my grandfather had something to do with building the St. Gilbert Church, the original
Okay.
over there.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I just can't escape. And I
Well,
don't want to.
I've been one of the things I Joanne and I have talked about is how this historic society and the stuff you're doing and the stuff it keeps some old memories alive of a community.
Yes.
And why is it there, or who is it there from, and
Right.
who's gone through there?
Right. And you know what? I think that's a good kind of public service announcement for people that live in our town to spend some time over at the Historical Society and check out the history of where they live, because that,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
shapes where we're at today. It's very interesting to see what they still have, right? There's
Right.
a ton of different things. Was the I'm trying to think time-wise because we just did something with the Grayslake Feed Store and their 85th anniversary was this year.
Now is that just on the other side of the tracks?
It is. It is.
Still there?
It's still
Okay.
there and they're doing great.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was there when you were here.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Wow.
Are the two sets of tracks? There's the one that actually you're talking about by the feed store. We
Yep.
actually went right behind the lumberyard too,
Correct.
and our house was just a little ways from that.
Right.
We People would come, looking for food and stuff, and my mom would always feed them. They'd walk on the tracks,
Oh, really?
and they'd say, "Go, could I have something to eat?" And she'd fix them something to eat.
Wow, isn't
I
that
don't know what they where they came from or where they went.
yeah.
Then the other rail was down at the south end of town, south of where Rockenbach Chevrolet used to be,
Right.
and where that grade school used to be
Yep.
was down there. And that what we do sometimes when I was a kid, we would on Saturdays there was a movie theater in Libertyville,
Okay.
and we would go down to the train station at the south end of town and ride the train from Grayslake to Liberty to is it Libertyville
Yeah.
Yep.
and go to the movies on Saturday
Really?
when we were, I mean, 12 or 14 or something like that.
That's really cool. And
And
that,
there are a number of kids that did that, so it wasn't unique.
right. So what else did you guys do for fun? You go to Libertyville and hang out in town, and it sounds like you worked and played ball a lot.
Well, I was usually involved in sports. That was kind of my sideline. And when I when I wasn't doing that, then I was probably working at the lumberyard.
Right. So you came from a with pretty good work ethic too, with you guys seem like you're always working.
Yeah, we did a lot of that.
Yeah. And especially in a small town like this, it's interesting because I can't even imagine what the surrounding, towns looked like at that time. What
Right.
was because now it's so congested with, everything kind of moves in.
What boundaries have homes been built on the other side of those tracks down at the south end of town,
South end of town on the
where the
other.
railroad station is at the south end?
There's actually a townhouse community that's on the other side of the tracks there that's called
Really?
Village Station. Yeah,
Okay.
so there's really nothing actually from there all the way like Allegheny Road that runs all the way down. So there's just that form of houses. To see like how far back we lived in a little thing where I'm actually sitting at today. It's called Avon on the Prairie. Was the
Hmm.
only we were one little circle that was the only thing that was passed in between Center Street and Washington Street because the college is just east of here, like College
Hmm.
Lake County. But there was
Right.
nothing out here. We were the only subdivision out here at one point.
Hmm.
I think my parents thought they really had made it at that point, as the town started expanding just a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Now the
How far north is the homes now? Do they go up? What is that, 21 that goes up along the
yeah,
east side and then curves around over?
yeah, we're packed all the way through. I think we talked about this. Did you know that Grayslake has two high schools?
Yeah, I didn't know that till you told me that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're big enough to have two high schools, so that's kind of
That's
a crazy,
amazing.
right? A lot of kids, a lot of
I
kids.
think a number of our relatives are in the cemetery up there on the north end of town. It's north of 21. There's that 83. I can't remember 21 or
83.
83.
Yeah.
Curves around and it heads toward Lake Villa or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a cemetery up there. I think there's a church up there too.
Yes. I think the cemetery that you're speaking of is the one that's right next to the new high school.
Oh, okay. So that's
Yeah.
where the high school is then.
Yeah, it's just it would be on the north, the high school's on the north side of that.
Right. On the south side of that road, just about there, is a farm that my grandparents, the Doolittles, lived on
Interesting.
in the turn of the century, probably 1900.
Okay, we do have a baseball field that's called Doolittle Park. I'm guaranteeing that's probably where
The name came from, sure.
I'm positive of that. Yeah, that would have to be. Wow, things just move along crazy.
About Jimmy Doolittle
Do you know about
from
Jimmy
that
Doolittle?
family?
I do not.
Jimmy Doolittle, from in World War II, he was a B-17 pilot or whatever what it was, and after the Japanese invaded, Hawaii or wherever, and they wanted to bomb Japan, and so he became the first guy to lead a group of planes off carriers, and they could take off from carriers, but they couldn't land back on them. And they bombed Japan, and they had to then, because they can't go back to their carriers, they had to fly toward China, and a lot of them crashed along the Chinese border and that sort of thing. And he was the commander of that flight.
Really? Holy cow. That's some serious history right there.
It is, yeah.
So what did you do? So you get done with playing baseball, and it sounds like you like to learn because of your education. So what did you do after you were done with baseball? What did you decide to do for a career after that?
Well, I've had four careers.
All right.
I just gave a talk at the hospital not long ago. I had to prepare for, so I just a little out of that.
Okay.
But my first career, of course, was sports, baseball and basketball, and I played, I think, a little over 5 years in the major leagues, and maybe a total of 7 years in professional baseball. And I kept going on to grad school, got a master's in engineering. And growing up, I liked to play with cars and soup them up and make them go a little faster. And back then you could do that. Now it's too technical.
Right.
But so I decided to go into engineering, but I went to work after baseball with Chrysler Corporation, and I got into advanced product planning, and it was helping design and determine what cars were going to be 2 or 3 years from now. And that was just a great job. And I had a guy I worked for who was just a terrific guy. He was just Bert Ebi, and he really helped my career because I'd sit in a bullpen area and he had an office outside, and we'd talk about what the dimension should be inside of a car, the H-point couple it's called, and the ceiling height and all this stuff. Well, I became the expert on that just because I studied a lot and talked to a lot of people about it. And so whenever there was going to be a new car presented up to the executives, which was 2 floors up from our, he'd say, Jay, why don't you go up and make the presentations? But he could have done it, himself, but he always was looking how he could give me exposure. And I got exposed to a lot of the executives within Chrysler. And so my career moved pretty quickly at Chrysler to other things.
Wow.
And then a guy I used to sing in the choir at the church we were at. It was a Methodist church in Birmingham, Michigan. And there was a guy in that choir that worked for Rockwell International. And he knew what I did with product planning and that sort of the marketing and stuff. And said, Jay, I'm starting a product planning department at Rockwell. Would you come and head it up? And of course, that sounded like a good idea.
Sure.
And so I went there, and I was there for 9 years, I think. And I progressed throughout, and got into general management and other things. And then a company by the name of Masco contacted me and said, Jay, would you come and be a group president at Masco? And where I had a number of companies that reported to me. And Rockwell, it was the same thing. I had gotten promoted to be a group vice president, was called then, but where I had 5 or 6 companies that I looked after. And so it was general management, really. And then and after Masco, I was there for quite a while, and the dean at the engineering school at Northwestern called me and said, Jay, he said, we're working on an MBA in manufacturing management. I know you've managed a bunch of these companies. Would you come back and be a professor? And so I thought, that really sounds interesting. And Joanne's parents still lived in Evanston, and so we kind of went back and forth. We still lived in Michigan, but I'd go back and forth to Northwestern, and I became a professor in the engineering department.
Wow.
And then I also got to I'd started volunteering at a seminary that was next door to the engineering school, because we had a son that was becoming a minister. And so I started doing that, and they finally, after I'd been doing that for a while, and I was chairman of that board for 5 or 6 years, and they gave me a doctorate from the seminary. And so I had that education stuff.
Yeah.
And the dean of the engineering school was a good friend. And one day he met a sister that was going to the University of Wisconsin, and she went through all this academic stuff and became an assistant professor and a minister and all that. she had to go through all these steps to become a full-time professor. And and one day the dean of the engineering department came in my office and said, Jay, we're making you a full professor without tenure. I called my sister and said, Joy, you told me this was hard to do. But
Wow.
anyway, so then we kind of thought we bought a place up here in Michigan, and we were spending more time up here. So I decided to retire from that. And then we moved up here. And I had the opportunity to meet some really interesting people throughout my careers. And I met a guy by the name of Edwards Deming. Well, Edwards Deming, there's what's called the Deming Awards in industry. But one day, the vice president of Ford called me and he said, Hey, Jay, he said, Edwards Deming is coming over for supper tonight because he doesn't like to eat in restaurants. So this guy was head of quality for Ford Motor Company. So I went over, I said, yeah, I'd love to meet him, And I went over and I sat with him. It was just he and I and the Ford guy and their wives. And I said, Dr. Deming, how did you get involved in Japan? And he said, well, after World War II, MacArthur, in about 1947, called me and asked me to come over to Japan and study our rice production in Japan because I wanted to improve it so we could take better care of Japanese people. And MacArthur was kind of running Japan at that point, And so he went over to Japan and he studied the rice production. He said, finally concluded that rice production in Japan was as efficient or more efficient than it was in America. But anyway, then in about 1952, the Japanese government called Dr. Deming back over to Japan. And they wanted to determine whether they were going to be the best paper mache country in the world or an industrial manufacturing country. And he went over and he got them interested in statistical analysis. And that's measuring all the different processes and having a way to do it. And so there's a Deming Award in Japan for outstanding, manufacturing companies. Wow. Well, then in the 60s and 70s, when I was meeting with him, he was now doing that with American industry, particularly the auto industry. And that's why he was at Ford doing that stuff. And he got involved, got them involved with statistical analysis and measuring all processes and see how you can improve them and all this. And it was so interesting, meeting with a guy like this and hearing about why he did things and what he did. And then when I came up here to Traverse City, and the college, a small college, it's a community college, asked me if I'd come over and serve on a couple committees over there. And so I did. And then one day the head of the hospital corporation called me, said, Jay, he said, would you come over and serve on this finance and audit committee for the hospital? Which I did. And that was in about 2001.
Wow.
And over the last 20 some years, I probably served on 13 or 14 committees at the hospital. I've been chairman of the board of the medical center for the area. And
COVID.
Pardon?
They kept you as chairman all through COVID.
Oh, yeah, I was chairman during COVID. And, I felt bad for the docs and the nurses, but I really felt bad for the people who cleaned rooms, the people that prepared food for all the people, in the hospital. And I got the hospital into the process of statistical analysis. And now hospitals all over use statistical analysis, and they compare themselves to other big hospital systems.
Sure.
And that's how they're measuring, different things. And about 6 months ago, I had called the head of the hospitals and said, Ed, we have lunch. You got to start getting younger people in here. and and so I kind of backed away from a lot of these committees now at the hospital because I'll be 89 next month.
Wow.
I have one last thing. Going back to basketball, did you tell him you played basketball against Wilt Chamberlain when he was?
What? Now you guys are just making stuff up.
No, no.
Well, when Will Chamberlain, when he was a freshman in college, went to the University of Kansas,
Okay.
and when he was like 7'1", but back then, he bulked up when he went to the pros.
Right.
But back then, he was pretty thin, and he was 7'1" or 2", and he could run like the wind.
Right.
And Northwestern played against Kansas the first game that Will Chamberlain played in college. He scored 52 points against us, and we had a center that was 6'10", but he couldn't
Right.
stop Chamberlain. Well, near the end of the game, we went into what's called a zone press. And the zone press is you put one person each quadrant of the floor, and one guy chases the ball. Well, I was the guy chasing the ball. And I was like 6'1", 6'2", and I could jump pretty good. And they brought Chamberlain up to half court, and they threw him the ball, and he's holding the ball like this. And I was maybe 10 feet away from him. And I thought I can knock it out of his hand. And I went running at him and jumped as high as I could. He didn't move. He just raised his hand. And I hit him right in the bicep. I thought, at that point in my life, I thought, hey, there's guys a lot better than I am doing stuff.
Wow. Okay, that is an awesome story. So you played basketball at Northwestern for how long?
Well, in 2 years, you couldn't play as a freshman.
Okay.
Back then, freshmen didn't play in the Big Ten. But then I played my sophomore and junior year, but then I signed to play pro ball at the end of my junior year, so I couldn't play athletic sports anymore.
You were supposed to be.
I was going to be the captain of the team too.
Oh, really? So that wasn't a big decision for you though, right? That was a
Well,
pretty,
no, but I wanted to get into baseball, so
yeah. That must have been such an exciting journey for your family and for you, like kind of surreal. I'm sure now looking back, after all these years, it's got to be just one of the a really cool highlight of your life.
yeah, and it's been fun throughout because I've met so many interesting people
Right.
and played against so many really good people, good guys.
Right.
It's guys you read about, or you used to read about it. They're all old like me now, but they were guys that were terrific.
David, he sounds like a really nice guy, which he is most of the time, but he had to have police escort twice while he played basketball for Northwestern.
Okay, I got to hear about that.
Or
Well, I had to have police escorts to get off the floor.
Okay, why is that?
Oh, because I one was at Wisconsin, and the first half this guy scored quite a few points, and the halftime the coach said, "Look, I want you to guard him the second half." Well, I did everything I could do. I played between him and the ball all the time, and
he's not a very nice guy at times.
and he didn't get the ball for quite a while in the second half, and they had all their offense set up for him.
Right.
Anyway, he came up behind me and hit me with his fist from behind me. I went over I'd been doing everything I could do. I backed into him all the time, and I did a lot of things I shouldn't have done. But I went over to the official and I said, "Hey, you ought to watch this guy. He's really playing dirty." He tried to do it again. I was looking for it, and the ref saw it and called a technical on him and threw him out of the game.
Really?
And that was terrible. I mean, I was the bad guy in this.
See, the truth comes out, and it only took your wife to bring it out of you. Well, how fun. That's fantastic, though. What an exciting I love that you come back to your experiences and the thing you've done because it all comes down to people, right?
Yeah.
And the great people you've met and the people that you honor by saying the people who have helped you, all along from baseball all the way through, the rest, your four careers.
Yeah. And people can make a difference for people. It's and you see, and I look at the success I've had in sports or baseball or working. There are people that can influence your life very easily.
Right.
And it's the attitude that you develop with people, I think that's important.
Absolutely.
David, how did you get into writing, or is this just a sideline for you?
Oh, I always say this is something that I've dedicated a lot of time to. That I hope we're expanding to different communities to tell people's stories. It's something I have a lot of passion for. So it's basically I do this and a lot of video work. Um,
Hmm.
but this is really my passion and I'm honored to speak with you today too, Jay, because for you to take the time out to tell the story and people around town here will get to hear some good history and immortalize stories, right? Because, when we're not around anymore to tell them, it's nice that this recording right here will last forever. That, you know,
Well, I was writing down some of the people,
yeah,
and when I think of people in Grayslake that really had made a difference for me in my life,
yeah,
I was just writing down there Len McCain, who was the principal of the grade school and the basketball coach, and from and that I was just in grade school then, and then through freshman, Paul Subject, the baseball coach, math teacher, and people like that. The Larry, oh, Larry, can't read my own writing.
I have the same problem.
But there was just so many. Pat Rooney, who was a football coach, and just a neat guy, but a hard nosed guy, but really a terrific guy. Walt Nessheim, Larry Rouse was the president of the school
That was his name, Larry Rouse.
for many years, and I mean that school was a new school when I went there.
Right,
The first one, not the latest one.
right,
But people like that were there in the community and they made the community, with their lives.
right. Yeah, and back to those are the people that make a difference, right? That have obviously had a huge impact on your life,
Right. Right.
and everything that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which
He
I
gave
think is
when he signed his contract and got a bonus, he gave money to the high school to redo the baseball field and make a really good dugout for the players.
really. So you gave some of your bonus money back to the Grayslake High School.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Few $1,000s to do help to make the baseball field a better field.
Yeah. Okay, so as of today, that high school field that has been it's crazy to look at it today because it really is a top-notch field. It's one of the best baseball fields around anywhere.
Is that right? I haven't seen it for a long time, so I don't know.
Yeah, if you ever come back into town to just just an amazing it's an amazing.
Now, is that up behind the parking lot of the first high school?
Okay, so have you seen the big addition with the giant field house at the high
No,
school?
no, I haven't.
Oh gosh, you'd be blown away to see what it's like. Okay, so when I grew up on Burton Street, Burton, kind of there's two Burtons, right? Not the one by the lake, but the other one. When I grew up there, at the end of our street was the baseball field. So we spent
Mhm.
all of our time, just came around the fence and would play there. But now that baseball field is tennis courts. So then they built the regular varsity field that's out there now that is absolutely amazing. Um,
Where is that located relative to the building?
okay, so I think it's in the same part it was when there, so it would be on what would be that? The west side,
The west side of the parking lot?
yes. So the old, the houses that were back in there that I forget what they called it at that time, I would get two different things, Clingerville or Clinkerville, they
Yeah,
called that back there.
that is, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
so it's right there. So there's a walking path that goes to the neighborhood. On the other side of that walking path is the varsity baseball field,
Okay.
along with the softball field on the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was supposed to tell you too. I talked to a couple of my baseball friends, and so my son and we were state runners up in 2023. It's one of the most
Wow.
successful Grayslake baseball teams that have ever done anything. It was kind of fun to see like all the people that came out, people from, the past and everything, just to come out and see such a wonderful accomplishment from, we're a big baseball town now.
Good,
And I
good.
mean, we get to compete with some, rather large communities.
Mm.
That's for
Who's the
sure.
baseball coach now?
Troy Whalen.
Troy Wait, I
Troy
don't know.
Whalen, and I saw him last night actually.
Mm.
But yeah, he's a great baseball coach. He knows how to win baseball games, Coaches
Well,
already,
when you talk to him, thank him for me.
I will. I will for sure. Yeah, he's a hard worker. We're just wondering when he's going to retire, and I did a little show with him, and of course he doesn't acknowledge, he doesn't tell guys like that. You can't get him out of baseball, no matter what you do, right? Nor do
How
we
long?
want him.
How long did he coach?
Oh man, he would kill me for not knowing the answer for that. Um, I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't know how long he's been there, but yeah, it's a really cool community that we have of. So I got to go through all that, and my son's playing in college right now, my
Hmm.
oldest son, but my youngest one is. So I'm doing this whole process over from the little league to all the way up from. It's
Where,
great.
Where's your son in college?
He goes to a little school in South Dakota. It's
Hmm.
called
Hmm.
Dakota State, and so I learned something when I went there. So when everybody says, "Well, is he in South Dakota or North Dakota?" I said, "Well, it's South Dakota." Because in let's say 1811, the school started as a teacher's college, but it was
Hmm.
for Dakota. And then a couple years later, they split North and South Dakota up. So it still remains Dakota State because there was
Yeah.
only one state there then,
Huh.
which
Huh.
is kind of some cool history.
Yeah. That's neat. That's
Yeah, it
neat.
is. It's kind of fun. Um, okay, so a couple questions before we finish too that I love to I usually have a little group of hot seat questions, I call them, some rapid fire answers. But talking to you, a couple that stick out in my mind that, um, on serious notes, like, what do you think that you wish you have learned earlier in your life? You've done a lot of really cool things, but looking back to be a young man, is there anything that you re wish you would have learned younger, that would have helped you move forward?
Hmm. No, no, I was really exposed to so many really terrific people that most of the things that I got involved in, people had good help with.
Hmm.
And so I guess I don't know that there was much as a young person that didn't get somehow exposed
Yeah,
or
you seem
talked
like you
about.
had a lot of good mentors, right?
That's
That
really
showed you the
true.
way.
That's
you
really
know, and
true.
that was a good time for you to grow up because life was good after World War II. And there was a lot of positive growth going on with people who appreciated life and the US.
Interesting. Interesting. You also strike me as a yes guy for everything when people ask you to be on a committee or try new things. You really seem like you maybe took some leaps of faith and said yes to a lot of opportunities that led you to success.
Well, if I had the time, really the limitation was time.
Hmm.
And if I had the time, I thought, well, why shouldn't I help, or do it or whatever.
Sure.
He had leadership qualities that were sort of innate in him that you don't appreciate thinking you're striving toward that, but people could see that in him.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? I think that you know, for people that have given to you so freely to teach you, leadership roles and everything, for the people that you mentioned that have made a big impact on your life,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of nice to see that you've done the same for others. I think that's
Well,
really
you wish you've done more, you know.
we we always wish we could do more, but unfortunately, the only currency that's limited is our time, right?
That's exactly right. And energy.
Yeah. Well, that goes with it. And the older we get, the less we have of that.
You know,
Uh,
one conversation I had a long time ago was with a person that was becoming my secretary. And I said to her, I said, you know, I really want you to treat people well because your relationship with the people that come to see us or whatever is a reflection on me.
sure.
You know, and so you know having people around you who are positive people
Mhm.
is a real benefit.
Absolutely. And kindness takes you a long way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Treating people the way that we want to be treated.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Almost Christian.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Which these days is getting harder to find. So I think more people need to take that lead.
You know, I should tell you that we have we have some kids and grandkids that are really involved in stuff.
Mhm.
And our daughter, well, we have a son who's a pastor. He got his Master of Divinity at Garrett, which was Northwestern, and then he worked in Memphis, Tennessee, for a large church, and then he moved back up to Michigan, and then he went on and got a doctorate at Asbury down in Kentucky, and you know he's headed up a church for now quite a few years, and you know is I watched that and I think, man, that's terrific. You know, then we have a daughter, Jama, who is heads up and organizes the community Bible study here in Traverse City,
Neat.
and she's got 291 women coming to that, and
Wow.
and it's not, you know, it's not in the church that they go to or we go to. It's in another church that they rent, and they it's community called Community Bible Study, and there's, I don't know, 60 or 70 kids that have to come and be taken care of during that time, and she just, you know, looks at it like, well, that's what we do. You know?
It's non-denominational.
And it's non-denominational, it's just Christian, you know.
Sure.
And so, you know, you see those kind of things and you think, gee, that's great.
Right.
That's what people should be doing.
Right. Making a difference, right, and helping people.
Right,
All right. I
right.
have one topic that I want to talk about before we close out that I need your advice from here. So, since the day that green Cadillac pulled up at the lumber yard, till now at 88, almost 89 years old, why don't you give our listeners some advice on what it takes for a successful marriage for this whole time? Sounds like
Just do whatever your wife says.
That's right.
No, I said that for her benefit.
of course.
No, you know, we've shared a life, and we've been married, what, 68 years?
It'll be 68 in December. And
And
David, the one word is selfless.
Selfless.
You've got to be selfless at times when you don't really want to be either.
well, Joanne, you know, Joanne had some tough times. I mean, we moved so many times.
Sure.
You know, the first 7 years we were married, we moved 22 times. And you know, I'd have to travel with the team, and Joanne would have to drive wherever we were going, and we ended up having a couple kids during that period, and she'd have to have the kids, and then we'd get to Cincinnati or New York or Seattle or Denver, and I'd be traveling, and Joanne would have to find us a place to live. You know, I mean, it's you're fortunate when you have a partner who's, you know, really involved and you know doing a lot of things.
Yeah. I'm sure that wasn't easy. I'm sure that it has to be 100% support, so you can follow your dreams and do what you need to do. And Joanna, how much fun was it traveling around like that?
Well, you know what? We were very young, and you can do anything when you're young and strong and have a lot of energy and you want to be successful in what you're doing. So you just do it.
That's very good advice. And all while you're young. Well, that's great. What was the other question I had written down that I wanted? Because it was one more baseball one. I know you said how much you enjoyed playing at Wrigley Field. Is there any place that you just couldn't stand to play or you dreaded to go to?
Well, the Polo Grounds, those first few years with the Mets, it was really an old polo field. And so the baselines were only like 240, I think, or 245.
Okay.
And the center field was like 400 feet, you know. And a lot of balls, you know, one game pitched when I was with the Mets, I pitched against Cincinnati, and Pete Rose was the first batter, and he hit an outside pitch on the opposite field from the way I think he was batting left-handed at that time, but and then it just clipped the foul pole for a home run. First pitch of the game. I lost that game 1-0
Oh,
on the
no.
first pitch of the game.
Oh,
That had only happened since I think 1932 or something like that, where you
really?
lost the game on the first pitch. And the guy that was pitching for the Reds was a good friend of mine, Jim Maloney, and he pitched a great game.
I guess so.
Another funny story about that park was against it must have been the Braves,
Braves, yeah.
and the bases were I was pitching and the bases were loaded and Hank Aaron came up and Casey came out to the mound and he said, Jay, he said, I want you to pitch him low and outside, make him hit it to center field. Next pitch, I threw a low outside fastball. He hit it about 430 feet to center field for a grand slam home run.
Well, you did what he didn't say how far. He just said he wanted you to hit the center field. Wow.
But that park was a difficult park to pitch in because you really didn't want him to pull the ball or swing late on it
No.
because you know that would along the foul lines.
Yeah, really sure.
You know, but people look at it and at that time, you know, the Yankees were a big deal, you know, because they had a great team, and we were not a good team, but the fans were absolutely fantastic. You know, they had all the things they did a lot of things, and they had a lot of them would bring signs and postages and you know all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they were big Mets fans. You know, they just loved the Mets. No matter, even though we lost, they were just so supportive.
Your
That's very
attendance was better.
The attendance, I think, that first year almost equaled the Yankees. It was just slightly less.
No kidding.
But it you know, I thought, man, oh man, the people were terrific.
That's awesome. So the first year that you were there, that the Mets were an expansion team? Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what, 60,
Was
60.
Houston, and New York were the two expansion teams.
Interesting. Okay, because they got rid teams moved around, right? And they were just making room for more teams. Is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you did say so you did pitch in a World Series against the Yankees.
No, I didn't get to pitch.
But
No,
you didn't get to pitch. But you got that Yankees team those years must have been really tough too.
they were a very good team. I shouldn't say we didn't. I didn't pitch against the Yankees. We had I don't know if they still have it or not. They call it the Mayor's Trophy game or something like that, where the Mets would play the Yankees, and we went over the first time we did that was at Yankee Stadium. So the Mets went over to Yankee Stadium and played the Yankees, and I was the starting pitcher for the Mets, and and it you know that I was out in the outfield before the game, and I was talking to a couple of the Whitey Ford or a couple of the other Yankee guys. They said, "Man, we've never heard noise like this." I mean, the Mets fans were so loud and so you know. And anyway, I was out on the mound, and out of the upper deck came this bag. It was a bag full of explosives, you know, skyrockets and stuff,
Yeah.
and they were lit, and it's smoking, you know, and the rockets are shooting off, and all the batter and the umpire and the catcher all ran back to the stands, and I was on the mound, like no place I could go, and and the ball, this bag came down and it landed about halfway between the pitcher's mound and home plate, and it just burned out. But I thought, man, where would that happen?
You can't even make that up.
You struck out Mickey Mantle.
Well,
Did she say Mickey Mantle?
well, she's saying I struck out Mickey Mantle, but
Did you really?
I don't remember that.
You did.
Out of all the things in your life you could remember, that would be the one that I remember. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all these stories with me, and I you don't know how much I appreciate your time. I think it's fantastic. It's a pleasure to see someone so full of life and talk about your experiences so candidly, and you and your wife's relationship. It's really cool. It's really cool. I love it. I'm going to wrap up. Anything else you want to message to Grayslake, or anything you want anybody to hear or know from our town?
No, just keep up what you're doing, man. I'm just really impressed with what has been happening with Grayslake. I mean, I up here, we're surrounded by little towns where we live. This place we live, it's called Bohemian Valley, where this farm is. In the 1850s, people from Bohemia, which was part of Czechoslovakia, came to Chicago, and then they sailed up along Lake Michigan on sailing ships. And right just north of where this valley is called Good Harbor Valley. And they got off at Good Harbor Valley and walked down this valley. There are a lot of little lakes up here, just like Lake County, where you are. And they came to this valley, and they thought, oh man, that's a gorgeous valley. So they applied to the government for land grants, 160-acre land grants, half-mile square. And they got them. And the original deeds were signed by Abraham Lincoln. And that's the valley we live in. We bought this farm back in 1986, I think.
Cool.
And redid the house, so it was livable, and they were redone different things. Well, we just love it here. The color now is turning spectacular, and it's a neat place to live, but that the area has become much more populated since we've been up here, because people from Chicago, Detroit, during COVID, people could work from home, so they started buying places up here, and they'd come from Indianapolis or New York or Detroit or Chicago, or and buy places up here because they could work from home with their Zooms and computers and stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So the bigger things get, I think it's important to remember the little small town roots, because small towns, I think, what makes America so great.
Yeah, that's really true. And something I actually worry about is, the big mail order companies. Actually, I understand the computer has really driven a lot of this, and iPhones and everything else, but I worry about the small businesses, because I feel that's what kind of built North America.
Sure.
So different towns like Grayslake that have a history of successful growth. And I know you've got a lot of people from Chicago and Milwaukee probably that have come down to your area or up to your area, and just like Joanne coming out from Evanston, with their grandparents.
Sure.
And it's great. I don't know how you could grow up in a nicer place than Grayslake.
Very well said. Very well said. Jay, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you very much.
Good.
Yeah, and thanks for the wonderful stories. And my dad says he wants to mail you a card to get autographed from you. After I told him a little.
On the outside, put something because I get so many. I've got a whole bunch of them here. I've got to do. But the local postmaster here, they know me, of course, because I have a post office box, and I got a box just because I didn't want to put our home address on it.
Right.
But now, most recently, I've been getting so many so many of these letters are coming to our home address.
Really? Well, it's probably because of the internet and it's easy to find things these days or something. I don't know. But
Right,
that's got to
right.
kind of be cool and an honor, especially at 88, to have letters still coming celebrating your success as a young man.
Well, one of the fun things I do, David, is we've got 13 grandchildren, and our 13, they're all older now. They're in their 20s and 30s. But when one of the best things we did in our life was we had what we call kids camp, and we would let 7 kids come one week and 6 the next week,
Okay.
and we just loved them, and they're from 4 different families, and they learned how to drive tractors and 4-wheelers and how to get lost in the woods and how to do stuff, and they got to know each other, and they really remain kind of a close family connection, even though they're scattered. One works for Lululemon in New York City now,
Wow.
and and one is a professor at the University of Maryland in biomedical engineering, and they've gone on to do some really interesting things. We've got 2 of them that are police officers.
Wow. What a cool thing as grandparents and great grandparents, right? That's great.
It really is, and but in a town like Grayslake, when you get families, and the kids, a lot of the kids leave, but a few of them stay around, and even the parents, their grandparents probably stick around pretty well.
Yeah.
And so, that history becomes an important element of their life,
Yes, sir.
like just like yours is.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there's a lot, and to preserve it and to tell the stories is a great thing to do. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're doing
I'm
that.
trying every day. Every day I'm trying. You never know what's going to happen. So, well, thank you. And I thank your lovely wife for me too for taking your time. I'm
Okay.
sure you're
She's sitting over on the other side of the room, but she can hear everything.
good. Hopefully she doesn't have a to-do list too big for you today.
It doesn't work so well, David. But I have to say you're creating something wonderful for history. So keep it up. It sounds like you know what to ask and how polite you are in asking. So
Well, thank you, ma'am.
parents, tell them, good job, Terrence. You've done a good job with this young man.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that very much. All right, so we're going to sign off, but Jay, we're going to keep in touch too because I want to hear all your exciting things going on.
Well, good. David, thanks for the call. And I meant to ask you, and I didn't
Yeah.
ask you.
Yeah,
Did
whatever.
any of these people, I don't know if they're still alive anymore, probably not. But and like Larry Roush or Len McCain, I don't know. He
No, he's
left
gone.
town. But Paul Subject, I know he passed away. Pat Rooney, any of those people still alive?
You know what? I have a gal in town here that works at the Historical Society, and I will find out for you, and I will communicate back because I do
Good.
not know.
Because I look at my little list here: Pat Rooney, Paul Subject, Walt Nessheim, Larry Rouse, Len McCain. All people that had an impact on me.
Right. Yes. Hey, and if there's anybody listening,
Many between those times and now
yeah,
who have done the same thing with younger people.
right. Yes, and those are the people that need to be celebrated.
Yeah,
Sure.
right,
Yeah, so
right.
if anybody's listening right now that knows the answers to what Jay is asking, please write into me so that I can report back. And I think that would be really cool to find out some stories behind that. So
Right.
awesome.
Well, David, good to speak with you, and thanks for asking all your questions.
Oh my gosh, thank you, sir. And Grayslake, hey, wherever you guys are listening today, whether you're on Apple, whether you're on Spotify, whether you're watching on YouTube, wherever you're at, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because that way our town gets to meet a new person from that's shaped our community every Tuesday, and we've done it for about the last 150 Tuesdays. So
Is that
I think,
wow?
yeah,
That's great.
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I think it helps bring our community together to hear the stories of the past and maybe some new people that come to town. I really think it does everything else. And as the way I end all of my shows, folks, anybody listening, people have bad days. and we never know what people are going through. So, my challenge to anybody listening right now is to go out to do one, two different random acts of kindness today, whether it's smiling to somebody, holding the door, being nice to the cashier at the store, whatever we need to do, because sometimes just a smile on the street can change people's day around. So, that is my challenge to everybody out there. So, Jay, thank you very much again, buddy. I appreciate you very
Thank you,
much.
David.
All right, and I hope you have a wonderful day, sir.
You too.
All right,
Okay.
thank you
Bye.
so much.